Today's guest is someone who doesn't fit neatly into a box. And honestly, that's what makes this conversation so interesting. Daniel Tolson is a business coach who's guided over 25,000 people and profiled 10,000 leaders across 100 countries, led teams of 17,000 at Emirates, and started as an Australian champion wakeboarder. But the real story: he overcame learning disabilities and serious health challenges early on, which drove his obsession with human behaviour and emotional intelligence. Now he's taking things even further, combining EQ, science, and AI to analyse stress and performance through voice biomarkers and technology. This is going to be a fascinating one. Daniel, welcome to the podcast.
Mate, pleasure to be here.
I want to say at the start, when I read all that, which is a lot, how does that actually make you feel? Especially the amount of people that you've connected with and no doubt helped transform.
It's pretty wild. When I was at school, I got diagnosed with linear sequential learning disability. And when I think back to that, to what I've achieved now, sometimes I shake my head. I'm like, did I actually do it? It seems so wild, but feels good.
Nice. Because, mate, when I read that out, and I know you, I've worked with you for a bit of time and you've helped me a lot. And it's crazy to think that you've had and would have and still would have such an effect on so many different people, so, and different walks of life as well. So hats off to you. But I've got one question straight up. You said that you can analyse someone's stress, health and mindset just purely from their voice. How accurate actually is that?
In 2020, when the pandemic kicked off, I'd just flown into Malaysia and I was talking to about 350 business people, and I met some scientists and they said, Daniel, what you're doing, we do. And I was like, well, what do I do? What do you do? They said, you're profiling people through questionnaire-based tools, but we can do it through the voice. And I was like, you got to be kidding. They said, in 90 seconds, we can detect up to 1,440 emotional triggers in the voice. I was like, well, what does that mean and what can you do? And they said, from a 90-second voice clip, we can detect 14,000 health and genetic issues. And I was like, that's got to be bullshit. How's that possible? And they were right. They could. And so it's been 7 years now since I've been using the technology, and it's 100% accurate. 100%.
Tell me a little bit more, for the people listening, what that actually means. Break it down for people.
To make a speech sound requires the coordination of your brain, your body, and all of your organs. It's the most complex system in the human body. So if you think about it, you've got to use your whole brain. You've got to use all of your organs. To make a speech sound, you have to engage your lungs, your diaphragm, your vocal cords. You have to have your heart synchronized with your body. And the voice reveals what the body conceals. And hidden inside the voice are microtremors. And those microtremors, based on your tone, your tempo, your pitch, your speed, your pace, your volume, hint at what's happening inside the body. And using signal processing tools, you can map those inflections back to health and genetic issues. You can look at people's sleep quality. You can look at people's energy. You can look at people's emotional intelligence. You can look at their levels of stress, anxiety. You can even measure their levels of confidence, all from a voice analysis.
That's crazy to think. So what stands out to me is when you said the voice reveals what the body conceals. That's powerful.
I was working with a couple of agents yesterday, and the first thing about people is people are complex and people are different. And we had 4 of them do a voice analysis, and each person was rated differently in 11 key areas. So we looked at their physical, emotional, mental and spiritual health. And the first thing we looked at was their sleep quality and energy levels.
Yeah.
And everybody had a different level of sleep quality and also energy. Their levels of emotional intelligence were also different. We had people with more active and inactive levels of self-awareness. We had people who were more self-disciplined. We had people who had poorer social health. We had different communication styles, and we also had different levels of courage and procrastination levels. And when we looked at it as a team, they could see how they were different, and they could see how complex they are. And that helps you become more compassionate, because when you can look at other people and you can see that they're wired differently, and that you're wired differently, you can let people off the hook.
Yeah.
You can be a little bit more gentle with people.
Yeah. Such a powerful tool. So what do you think biometrics reveals that most people, I guess, would be most surprised by? What would stand out?
There's many different biomarkers. We can do genetic testing, and genetic testing is good at looking at conditions with DNA.
Yeah.
But genetic conditions can't reveal the connection between emotions and disease, where voice can. Voice has a lot of data. DNA is the richest, but voice will have up to 20 million bits of information in a 60-second voice sample.
That's wild.
And in the voice, things like Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease will show up in the voice 5 or 10 years before it manifests in the body.
Yeah.
Imbalances in sleep. This technology is also detective and predictive. If you're going to have a sleep disturbance, the voice is impacted 2 to 12 weeks before the sleeping issues show up in the body.
Yeah.
Anxiety levels. Anxiety levels will peak in the voice a month before they show up in the body. So a lot of the things that we do in the Western world is we're just looking at cause and effect. What happened today that's made me feel a particular way? But through voice analysis, we can see these patterns showing up 5, 10 or 15 years in advance.
Mm.
And so it enables us to be predictive, that if these particular health and genetic issues aren't brought into balance, then we will see these negative health outcomes in the future.
What do you think people don't draw on this more, the voice recognition stuff?
They think it's bullshit.
Mm.
Like they hear it. And when you read it out before, you listen to it and you're like, this can't make sense.
Because I'm listening to all this right now.
Mm.
And obviously I've had a personal experience with you with coaching and, you know, the method of frequency and stuff like that. I personally, I've done it.
Mm.
So I can see how it's benefited me.
Mm.
But even now listening back to all of this, having done it, I'm still thinking, this is wild. Like, is this true? Is it, how accurate is it? So I guess then it asks, you know, I'm thinking this technology, where does it start to become controversial and even misunderstood would be a better question, because I feel like people would really misunderstand this technology and its application and actually how powerful and how good it is.
It's sci-fi.
Yeah.
You and I have used the telephone
Yep.
our whole life. we leave voice messages on WhatsApp. We do podcasts, we make videos, and we're always using our voice. Like in a podcast today, it's audio and video.
Yeah.
So we're recording it. We have no idea how it gets from the microphone to the mixing decks, through the airwaves, into my ears. We've got no idea. And it's mind-blowing on how they use it. There was a convention held in Vegas late last year, and they were talking about the developments in vocal biomarker technology. And police stations in South America are now using vocal biomarker technology. So when the police officer goes out into the field, he's got his vest on, he's got his camera, he's got his two-way, and through the microphone and the two-way, it's constantly analysing the police officer's voice. And it's listening in for different emotional frequencies in the voice. As an example, the emotion of guilt and shame resonates at around about 20 to 30 hertz. We know that. We can measure it. Other emotions like anger and rage are between 100 and 150 hertz in fear.
Yeah.
We know that all emotions have a frequency.
Yeah.
And through signal processing, they can pick this up just by listening to the voice. So the reason why the police are using it is they want to flag early signs of PTSD. And they don't want a police officer going out in the field who's got PTSD because they're afraid that he's going to pull a gun at the wrong time. So as soon as those signals show up in the voice, they're provided mental health and emotional health care. That's one way. Another way is they're using it inside of hospitals. So nurses, hundreds of them are attacked every single month in America.
Yeah.
So they'll have their iPad or their device, and as they're talking to the patient, the microphone's listening into the conversation. Not on the words. It's not a large language model. They're listening to emotional frequencies in the voice. And if you're the patient or if you've come into the hospital and your emotional tone shows emotions of anger or rage, an alert will be sent through the hospital to the security to say we need to be on high alert.
Mindful.
Because we've picked up these triggers in the voice. That's wild. Qantas and Myers here in Australia are using the technology, and they're using it on the airline to make sure that the pilot is emotionally healthy. So we're using it in Australia. Hospitals are using it. So many of us have used telemedicine before, but we don't understand how it works. So some of these cities in India, there might be 6 million people in the population, but you might only have a couple of doctors who specialise in the heart. So if 100 or 200 people out of this 6 million population have a heart problem, they quickly rush to the hospital. And then they've got to try to triage these patients and figure out who needs attention and who doesn't. But in these regions of India, they might have to travel in an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours just to get to the hospital and realise that there's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
So what they're doing now is they're saying to their patients, don't leave your home. Do a voice analysis, and if you're flagged high risk for critical heart failure, we'll give you a green light to the hospital. But if you don't show signs of critical heart failure, don't come in. And so you could imagine 6 million people, limited doctors, the hospital can't handle it. But through a 90-second voice analysis, they can predict critical heart failure up to 21 days in advance.
That's crazy.
And this is why it sounds crazy, because most of us go to the doctor when we feel sick.
Yeah.
And this is preventative. So you can look at it, and if there's a problem now, you can have a look at the emotion that is influencing the heart problem. What we forget is that your blood is the emotional river of the body. When you feel something, the chemical gets into the blood and it travels through all the organs and it goes to your heart. It impacts the heart, it impacts the spleen, it impacts the liver, it impacts the intestines. You know, if you've been nervous before, which we all get nervous, you feel like your bladder wants to run. I've got to go away and do a little nervous poo before the listing.
Mm.
So the emotion gets in the blood and it will impact the heart. So we can also see what's the emotion that's triggering different organs. And we can detect up to 14,000 health and genetic issues. Imagine that, knowing that your voice is revealing signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's in 2026. It might give you 10 years head start to course correct.
That's what I'm thinking. As I'm listening to you now, it's so progressive that it could tell you a story 5-10 years in advance that you would never know until too late, or, you know, that's crazy. That's wild.
When you and I did your voice analysis, we were looking at frequent and core emotions.
Yeah.
And we're detecting 55 different emotions. And the head start that it gives you awareness.
Yeah.
Because we say in emotional intelligence, if you can name it, you can tame it. So instead of going through hours of coaching, months of therapy, the technology analyzes the emotion and gives you data. And it says, this is the emotion that's impacting your mind and body.
Mm.
Deal with that. And if anybody's been in therapy before, who has an hour to lay on the psychologist's couch every week for 12 weeks just trying to figure out what the problem is? So it accelerates everything that we do.
I think for me, that when I personally worked with you, the super powerful thing was the awareness piece, which is what you're talking about now. So to be able to analyze something so quickly, and then maybe because this is a podcast and people are listening, but for anyone that is to watch the podcast, we can even get a couple of those graphs and pop them up on the screen. But especially me being a highly visual kinesthetic person, when you showed me those graphs and the frequency and my my anger, all that stuff, and I physically could see it. Mm. That too was, one, confronting, but two, it actually made me realize, okay, I need to do some work here. I'm not feeling 100%. We were able to analyze stuff really, really quickly. Mm. And not only that, but when you put a plan together for me and we worked on that, it was really easy to see, okay, these are the issues, these are the problems, here's a plan or solution. And then I guess to stick to that was also really easy because it was right plain in front of me. Mm. So super powerful. It's crazy that more people aren't actually utilizing this technology.
I think it comes down to faith.
Yeah.
And it's not religious faith. It's, if you're faithful, you believe in the invisible.
Yeah.
But most people don't believe in the invisible. So what I said to my team of doctors, I said, we have to make the invisible visible, because I believe that people believe in what they can see.
Yeah.
Having faith means you've got to believe in the invisible. But if you can't show me something, how do you expect me to believe you? And that's how we invented the technology. We said we've got to take the voice and we have to make it visible. So in terms of what we've done, we build software.
Yeah.
Everything else has hundreds, if not thousands, of years of research. If you've been to a traditional Chinese medical doctor, this wisdom is 3,000 to 5,000 years old. Our systems are trained on traditional Chinese medicine.
Mm.
The Chinese doctor feels your pulse. The Chinese medicine doctor looks at your tongue. We just listen to the voice. So our technology is trained on that. Also, some of the ancient healing methods of sound. If we go back to the churches used to have bells. And each of those bells had their own musical note. And each of those musical notes had a frequency. And they used to use bells to heal people hundreds and thousands of years ago. This technology has existed. We're just making it accessible.
Yeah.
It's like today, people listen to the radio every day. I was doing the research, maybe we don't listen to the radio, but we listen to podcasts. And one of the biggest providers of music in the world today is Spotify. Spotify has over 700 million downloads every single month. But what people don't know is that there's a certain frequency that all the music is tuned to. It's tuned to a frequency of 440 megahertz. When you are exposed to 440 megahertz, you feel anxious, you feel angry, and you feel nervous.
Mm.
And how much time do we spend listening to podcasts, to music, to YouTube, to the radio, to movies? And it's all tuned to 440 hertz. They did this 60 or 70 years ago. But the healthiest frequency that everything used to be tuned to was the musical note of A and 432 megahertz. And when you listen to music that's tuned to 432 megahertz, you feel calm. Your nervous system comes back into balance. And we know it. The research is out there. Fact check me right now, and you will see that Spotify is tuned to 440 megahertz. It makes you feel anxious and angry and nervous. But get exposed to a frequency of 432 hertz, the nervous system calms back down. And instead of having a sympathetic dominance, we start to heal and we get a balance. So the body's perfectly balanced between parasympathetic and sympathetic.
So
and that's
when
just
you're
by music.
So when you're telling me that I'm driving to work in the morning and I'm listening to my podcast every single morning for 30, 40 minutes before I start my day, probably not the best time to be listening to Spotify podcast.
Well, make sure yours is tuned to 432.
Or I'll retune it.
Let's say this, for example. We don't know it in our left brain.
Yeah.
But when you catch up with some mates and they're telling a joke and you walk into the room, do you have to know what they've been talking about to feel the vibe?
No.
You walk in there and you can feel there's a high energy.
Yeah.
And as humans, we absorb emotions.
Yeah.
It's called emotional contagion. And emotions are contagious. So when you're with a group of people and they're having a great time, they're high in courage, they're having fun, their conversation is resonating at a frequency of 250 to 300 hertz.
Yeah.
And you walk in there and you feel it. But for the people who have ever been in a broken home and you walk into that room and somebody's been arguing in the room, somebody's been fighting, you walk in, you absorb the emotion, and immediately you start to tense up. And those low frequencies, like if you've ever grown up in a family where there was a lot of guilt and shame used, or if you've ever been in a relationship where somebody's used guilt on you, that's almost the lowest emotional frequency on the planet. Guilt and shame resonate at around about 20 to 30 hertz.
Yeah.
And there's only one frequency beneath that, which is 0 hertz, and that's death.
Death, yeah.
So when you've been around low vibe people, it's like those dementors on Harry Potter that steal a part of your soul. But as soon as you spend time with high frequency people, you come back to life. And these emotional frequencies, there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. David Hawkins, and he mapped out the spectrum of human consciousness from 0 hertz, which is death, all the way up to about 700. Now, when you start to get to 500 hertz, you're exposed to love. And an emotion of love can neutralize all the negative emotions below it. But if you can get your emotional frequency up to around 700, 700 is what they call Christ consciousness. This is the frequency of Mother Teresa, Jesus Christ, the Buddha, Muhammad. And when you resonate at a frequency of 700 hertz or above, one person can have a positive impact on more than 75 million people on the planet. And if you think about it, if you've heard about Jesus, a lot of people resonate with his teachings, and he hasn't been around for thousands of years. People who follow Muhammad, they listen to his teachings and they resonate to that higher level. And so the higher level emotion will pull people up. And so this is simply what we're measuring. We can measure that emotional frequency.
It's interesting because obviously there'd be a lot of people that listen to this that aren't just real estate agents, but there'd be a lot of agents that'll listen to this as well. I always say whenever we go into a listing presentation, energy is everything. And obviously I'm not gauging it on hertz. And, I more talk about frequency and energy and how and when and, how you're vibrating. Same. Obviously just different dialogue, right? And your potential client, seller, or whoever that may be, they genuinely feel how you are. And that would directly give them a message of whether you're calm, your strategy is going to make sense, whether they feel safe by being guided by you in the selling process. So we talk about the same thing when we go into a listing presentation. It is actually a real thing. How you vibrate, your frequency, the hertz, really interesting stuff.
You use your emotional intelligence to measure it.
Yeah.
Aussies has got a good bullshit meter.
Yeah.
It's built into us.
Yep.
We're just using a piece of technology and just making the invisible visible. And this type of thing, when we look at particular factors of a salesperson's psychology, there's one area that I'm always really fascinated by, and it's called social health. And it fascinates me because when I started my career in real estate, my uncle said to me, he said, "Danny boy, people get into selling because they're depressed." I said, "Okay." And he said, "They get out because they're depressed." Now, that was his opinion. I have done the research, and the latest research shows, all the way up till today, that 43% of salespeople suffer from mental and emotional health issues. 43%.
That's a lot.
It's backed with science. And I can measure this. And what happens is once you identify that an area of your selling game is underperforming, you start to put your energy into other places. A guy told me recently, real estate agent, he said, "Daniel, you've explained it to me in science. Let me tell you what it looks like in the field, social health." And I said, "What does it look like?" He said, "Well, in the morning, I wake up." And he said, "It's like I put my hand in my pocket and I've got 10 golden coins." And he said, "Every time I have an interaction with somebody, they take a golden coin out of my hand." And he said, "By the end of the day, there's no golden coins left in my hand. There's nothing in my pocket. And I go home and I lay on the bed and I'm absolutely exhausted." He said, "People have just taken a piece of me all day."
Yeah.
He said, "But on the other hand, my fiance starts the day with nothing in her pocket. And every time she speaks to somebody, she takes a golden coin out of their hand. And when she gets home, she's full of energy. She's ready to go. She's ready to party." And he said, "That's how I read social health." And he said, "Your technology's right, because at the start of the day, I'm full of energy, but by the time I get home, everything has been taken away from me." And I thought about it. I did the research, and it's true for 43%. I know it's true for me. I used to do big events in the pandemic where I'd be speaking to 500 people, and I would finish an 8-hour event and I was absolutely drained. They weren't in front of me, but energetically they were feeding off my energy.
Yeah.
Like a salesperson, you have to control the energy in the room. And I was just absolutely exhausted. And when I saw my social health being impacted, I had to make a decision that I don't want to do large-scale events anymore because it just depleted me of my life force. And that was a big wake-up for me because I couldn't figure out why my energy always dropped when I was doing something I loved.
Yeah.
But it was just that one key area. It was social health.
Yeah.
So it helps you make better decisions.
It's interesting because obviously being heavily in sales, if I would drive to the gym before I do a workout, which would take energy, okay, I would often find myself sitting in the car for maybe 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, just in silence. So I wouldn't actually really do anything. And I'd make sure that I was off my phone. And I just sat there. And funnily enough, subconsciously I did it and I wasn't thinking about it. And I thought every time I got out of the car and went to the gym, I'm being lazy, or why am I procrastinating? And I love training and I look forward to going to the gym. It recalibrates me, right? To reset. And then of late, I realized that I actually needed to just stop because those coins were all taken and I was so drained from the day and I was getting re-geared up to go and train and lift weights and push heavy things, and that's obviously going to affect your nervous system and stuff like that. So I would actually just need a moment to sit back, Daniel, and get my energy back, And even if I went to an event or had a dinner or something, I would do the same thing in the car. But I found that was a common occurrence that I used to do, and it made sense why. But of recently, I didn't really click onto that until recent.
The biggest predictor of success, it's my opinion, it's the opinion of Forbes magazine, is that the most important skill set for the years ahead is understanding AI and understanding EI, emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence contributes to up to 58% of your success in life. And people who are emotionally aware succeed in 5 areas. Number one, they're self-aware. They understand what's happening inside of their mind, inside of their heart, inside of their body. Secondly, they're very good in regulating their emotions. Everybody has highs, everybody has lows, but what happens is some people can't get out of the low quick enough.
Yeah.
And that's emotional management. Everybody has to be motivated. And there's 3 types of motivation. There's biological motivation. You and I, doesn't matter if you're a millionaire or a billionaire, we all do 2 things in the morning. We shit and piss. We're all the same.
Yeah.
We've got to go to the bathroom. We've got to have our physiological needs met. We've got to eat. We need shelter. And most people are only motivated just to live. That's it. The second part of motivation there is extrinsic motivation. All of us have goals, but some people are heavily focused on the tangible. It could be the watch, the house, the car. And they get it. And a lot of the times they have a feeling of unfulfillment. And I was talking to a guy recently and he bought a new car and he said after 6 months it was the same as every other car. He bought his first Rolex, he got his second Rolex. Now he doesn't know which one to wear. And sometimes the physical things, we work hard, but it doesn't give us the fulfillment that we're looking for. The third level is what's called intrinsic motivation. And it's when you find what you're truly passionate about. And for a lot of us, it's a career. And if you're really passionate about property and you're selling properties, the fact that you go to an office every day and you sell property, it motivates you. You love it. If you're motivated by money and you can increase your income through sales, every single day you're just focused on the ability to make money. And that's an intrinsic motivator. And the skill in life is to figure out what drives you, whether it be a balance of intrinsic and extrinsic rewards, and set your goals around that. And you should have unlimited motivation. The other 2 areas are social awareness. Social awareness is understanding why other people think and feel the way that they do. And for salespeople, you're sales psychologists. You're listening to people's thinking, their logic. You're listening into the emotional tone. What are those emotional words? What are the triggers? Why are they really doing what they do? and then you present to that. And just in there, if you can understand how people think and feel, if people look at you and say, this person understands me, they have compassion, a buyer of your product is 86% more likely to buy because you understand how they think and feel.
Mm.
And then the final part is social regulation, and that's just your ability to communicate to others. So if you can develop emotionally in those 5 key areas, there's really no cap on your potential. It has nothing to do with IQ. Your IQ is what it is. Maybe it goes up a little bit. Maybe it goes down. I think you know some of those people.
Yes, a few.
But AI is important and EQ is important. And if people master EQ, life gets good fast.
I'm curious. I want to backtrack a little bit, right? I want to understand how you got into this. I feel like you've had a thirst for information. And I know if it's okay if I talk about earlier on in your life, you mentioned about learning disabilities, health challenges. Talk to me a little bit about that and how that actually acts as a motivator and a driver to where you are today and what you do today. And even me thinking about this, because you are one of the most intelligent people that I've spoken to, even though you might not realize that.
Yes.
I could listen to you all day. And does that blow your mind of when you grew up, where you came from and where you are right now today? Talk to me a little bit about that path and what that looked like and how you got here.
I got a lovely compliment in Taiwan a couple of weeks ago.
Because you live in
I live in Taiwan.
As well, just so everyone knows.
This gentleman, maybe he's worth $100 million.
Yep.
And he said to me, he goes, Daniel, you're an interesting guy. And I said, thank you so much. He said, you've done a lot in your time. I said, thank you very much. He said, do you have Asperger's? Are you on the spectrum? I didn't want to lie. And I said, well, absolutely, I am. He said, really? And I said, yeah. I said, I was diagnosed with linear sequential learning disability when I was around about 10. And he said, what's that? And I said, when I went to school, I could not learn in a linear way. I couldn't go A, B, C, D, E. I couldn't go 1, 2, 3. My brain's over here, over here, over here, and it's connecting all the dots. And for me, that was totally normal. But the school system had different feedback. So my parents would always get these reports and it's like, Daniel's a great student if he just paid more attention. My attention's bouncing off the walls.
Yeah.
And then the teachers would say, if Daniel just tried a little bit harder, oh, fuck, I'm trying as hard as I can. You got no idea what it's like to live inside my head. And I would look around and I'd be bored because I seemed just to pick things up. And everybody else was learning slow. So what do? You've learned it and you're sitting around for everybody else to catch up. So anyway, I'll fast forward and I'll come back. Eventually they did an IQ test and I had a child psychologist assess my IQ. And they said to my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Tolson, your boy's got an IQ of like 130. He's a potential genius, but he's only using one portion of his brain. And for me, I was like, oh, that's cool. What about the other half? So I'll go back again. I was probably 9 or 10. I'd wake up in the morning, my nose is bleeding. Just bleeding, just the blood's coming out. I'm playing football. People are throwing the ball and my hands are over here to catch it and the ball's going over there. I'm running and my knees would collapse. My hips would collapse. I was just in pain, my body, all the time. But I've never lived in your body. I don't know what it's like. Maybe this is just life. And I couldn't see things properly. I'd look at things and I couldn't fixate on things. I'm playing the guitar. And I remember one time my mum got the guitar and she was just fed up because I'd made so many mistakes, and she took it and she smashed it. Couldn't figure out what was going on. Why can't I just seem to get things like everybody else? I was going to music lessons and I'm trying to play the guitar. And none of it made any sense. The world was so bizarre. For me, I just went through this period where everything was going wrong. I started to have major allergies. I was having allergy tests nonstop. I'm taking all of these puffers and these things that are going in my mouth. I'm taking all these tablets. And I remember one day I was in class and I was looking at the board and I could see the words on the board, and then I'd write them down. But what I saw on the board and what I saw here were totally different things. It made no sense. And then the teacher would be like, Daniel, can you read it out? And I'd read it out and the kids would just laugh. And so my parents started to talk to the teachers. Is there something wrong with our son? And so eventually we got some good advice and they realised that I had a twisted spine. That's putting out my hips. That's making my knees collapse. My shoulders are out of alignment. My neck's out of alignment. We have 6 plates in the head, and these were out of alignment, and that was pushing down the left and right hemisphere of the brain. There was so much pressure in there that was causing my nose to bleed, constant migraine headaches. That was creating visual impairments. I was also tone deaf. And all of this shit is happening, and I'm 10 years old. And then for 5 years, they tried to fix me, and I went into remedial therapy. And that was weird because I looked around at the other kids and I'm in the room with the kids licking the windows. They put me in a place called the Space Lab. And I thought this was for kids who are going to be astronauts. Like, this must be a place for intelligent kids.
Yeah.
It's the place for the kids off the planet.
Yeah.
And I'm in there, I'm like, this is weird. Like, I don't look like them, but that was my perception. And that was my early years, and it was tough. For 5 years, constant remedial therapy. I then developed Epstein-Barr virus and chronic fatigue. I was sleeping 12 hours a day. I missed a bunch of school. And eventually, by the time I got back to school, I think I was just at the start of year 11. And the senior master and the headmaster said, Mr. Tolson, you've missed a lot of school. We just recommend that you don't come back. And it was weird because I was thinking, what will I be able to achieve? If I've had all of this disability, now what? And then it went downhill again. Next couple of years, I had a couple of knee reconstructions and that's when I got into real estate. And that's why my uncle said, Daniel, people get into real estate because they're depressed. So he was telling me, you're depressed. And it was just a shit of a time. But my brain worked differently. Today I've self-published 21 books. And I think about that and I'm like, that's pretty cool. And the reason why I wrote the books was because Einstein once said, I'll never commit something to memory that I can find in a book. And so I thought to myself, that's really good wisdom. If I learn all of this, I wrote a book on sleep. I wrote a book on sound therapy. I wrote books on vocal biomarker technology. I've written books on stress management. I've written books on goal setting. I was just like, I'm going to put all this information into a place that I can find. And so over the years, I've put into 21 books.
That's incredible.
And if I do that, I remember it.
So what was the turning point for you then?
I lost a business in 2007. And it was just a mismatch in personalities. And I was living in Dubai and I'd been coaching wakeboarding. I had a very successful clothing business. We had our clothes in shops across the country. And the relationship that I was in wasn't right. the business relationship wasn't the best, and I lost the business. I tried to get another job. That didn't work out, and I returned to Australia. And so it's now the middle of 2008, and that was probably the lowest point in my life. And the only job that an uneducated guy could get was traffic controlling. And I stood on the side of construction sites, on the side of the freeway, directing traffic. And that was shit.
In your 20s?
I was 27.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is it. That's my life. Because I wasn't educated. I tried to go to university again because I thought that was the right thing to do. And even the professor, after the first term at university, said to me, Daniel, you need to go back to school. If you want to succeed in university, you've got to go back to school. You've got to do year 11 and 12. And I was like, that's not what I want. I don't want to do all that again. It just doesn't work for me.
Mm.
And so I was standing on a street in Sydney, and it's like one of those come to God moments. And I'm looking up and thinking, is this the best it is going to get? And I kind of made a pact with myself. I was at the bottom of the barrel and I said, you know what? I've lived in Dubai. I had a great time. I'm going to go work for Emirates Airline. And everything just started to click. My previous girlfriend had worked with Emirates. I'd seen the lifestyle. I drove home from that job site. I went over the Sydney Harbour Bridge. I looked up. There's a white building with a big Emirates sign on it. I went down to the news agency. I opened the paper. Emirates is recruiting. I picked up the phone and said, I want to apply. They said, we're going to be recruiting in Sydney in 2 weeks from now. I got my hair cut. I had a fashion mullet. I went in. I was on my best behaviour. I read the play. I got in there. I went through the first round, the second round, the third round. They called me up after a couple of weeks and they said, Mr. Tolson, congratulations. Welcome to Emirates. They said, can you be here in 6 weeks? I said, no, I can be there now. And they said, okay, well, we'll fast track you. I was in Dubai within about 3 weeks. And I landed into Dubai for the third time in my life. And I had this feeling, and Maoris call it a tūdonga waiwai. And a tūdonga waiwai is your belonging place.
Mm.
And I went there and went, I belong here. Me and my brain, the way that it works, is actually rewarded here. Now, they say in the Bible, hopefully so I might be telling a lie, but I'm pretty sure in the Bible it says, a prophet has no honour in his own land. And that's how I felt. I felt, I've got all these interesting ways to view the world, but people don't appreciate it here. I have to find a place in the world where people appreciate my difference. And I got into Emirates and I went on this learning journey. I knew that Emirates would be something short-term for me. Every little bit of education they offered me, I took it.
Mm.
They trained me as a leader. They trained me in safety and security. They trained me in peer support, critical incident stress management, and it was just 4 years of training. But I kept coming up against the same block. And my learning disability from the past kept coming up. And it came up in the first 6 weeks of training. After I'd done the education, we had to pass the licensing exams. And as soon as I sat in front of that computer, my brain just did a brain fart and went, and I failed the exam. And I was about to lose my career potentially because I couldn't pass an exam. And I had to go sit in front of my manager. So I'm 28, but I feel like I'm 8 years old. I feel like I've gone 20 years back into the past in the time machine. And here I am. I'm not making excuses, but I'm explaining myself. And I said to my manager, I said, look, I've been studying. I've been going to bed at 10 o'clock at night, waking up at 5 in the morning. I'm studying and I've failed this exam and my learning disability is coming back to haunt me. There's something that's happening in my brain that I just can't process the exam. I could read the questions, but my pen literally would tick the wrong box.
Mm.
And so I'm 28 again. explaining stuff that was happening 20 years ago. And every single year for 4 years, I had to tell this same story. And I said to my manager, I said, look, I can promise you I'm very intelligent. If you could ask me the question, I could give you the answer verbally. But there's something happening with this machine that I can't respond. And they said, well, Daniel, if you can't pass the test, you won't be able to get your license. So I went through all that stress again.
Yeah.
But for 4 years, I just educated myself nonstop. I remember I would fly in and out of Singapore, and there's a complex called Brass Busser Complex, and they sell secondhand books. And I knew there was an author by the name of Dr. Edward de Bono because I'd been exposed to his work in the early 90s. And I thought to myself, I've got to rewire my brain. And I would bid and ask the company to send me to Singapore. I'd take an empty suitcase, pair of board shorts, and I'd fill my suitcase up with as many books as I could. I'd go there, I'd buy 5 or 10 books. I'd bring them back to Dubai. I'd study. I'd go back, get another 5 or 10 books. And from one author, I read 75 of his books. And so I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with my brain. And through his work, Dr. Edward de Bono, he came up with the term lateral thinking. And so I've been diagnosed with linear sequential learning disability, and he's writing books on teaching people to think the way that my mind works. And what I realized was that I didn't have a learning disability. The teachers had a teaching disability. And they could only teach linear thinkers. But I just had a lateral thinking mind. And here I am for 20 years trying to explain it away. And it's just become my biggest asset. And so when I consume information today, like this guy said in Taiwan, are you on the spectrum? Do you have Asperger's? I probably don't have Asperger's, but my mind works differently. But I've just learned how to use it. But it took me a long time. And so that was tough.
Was there something that you told yourself every time you went through the really tough stuff and the challenges? Because there's a lot of setbacks there. What did you consistently tell yourself to push through, to keep going?
What would you
tell yourself?
I'll tell you what I told my wife. So I met my wife, Nini, on a flight to Johannesburg. And so we were both cabin crew with Emirates Airline. We had a long-distance relationship. She lived 800 metres down the street. But if you've lived in Dubai and it's 50 degrees, 800 metres is a long way.
Yeah.
So we happened to be on the same bus, and I was a lot bigger then than I am now, and we're in the same briefing room, and we're on the same flight to Johannesburg. And we kicked it off, and when we're on the aircraft, I said to her, would you fancy going out on a date with me? She said, no, I'm not interested. And I said, you just seem like you're really nice. And she said, no. And what I learned in sales is you never take rejection personally. So I stole her pen, and it was a Hello Kitty pen, and it would spin around and all these LED lights would go off. And she's looking for a pen. She said, Daniel, do you have my pen? I said, yeah, I do. She said, can I have it back? And I'd say, only if you go on a date with me. And she said, you can keep the pen. The next thing that I found was her Hello Kitty drink bottle, and I hid that on the aircraft. And these Emirates aircrafts are massive. Yeah. They're huge. And I hid the drink bottle. And she said, hey, do you know where my drink bottle is? I said, yeah, I've got it. And I said, if you go out on a date with me in Dubai, I'll give you your drink bottle back. And she's like, no, you can keep the drink bottle. So, most people give up after the first attempt. Yeah. Good salespeople ask 12 or 13 times. And eventually, towards the end of the flight, I said, I'll give you your pen and your drink bottle back if you go on a date with me. And she said, I've been on heaps of dates. And I said, this is going to be your last. She said, are you a serial killer? That's just super creepy. I said, no, it's going to be so good that it will be the last date you ever go on. And she said, okay. So I rocked up to her house, 800 metres down the street. I show up in a pair of Australian footy shorts, green and gold, and a singlet on. And she said, that's how you Aussies dress for a date? And I said, yeah. I said, you better go up and get changed. You dressed up too much. She said, "Where are we going?" I said, "I'll surprise you." And so she came back down and I took her kickboxing
Oh,
for
no
the very
way.
first date. And that was the last date. But what I used to say to myself, after I met my wife, she said to me, she said, "Daniel, I want a job where I get paid to do nothing." And I said, "Don't we all? Like, that's the dream, get paid to do nothing." And for about 6 months, she just kept saying it over and over and again. And by this time, we're engaged. And I sat her down and I said, "Sweetheart, be careful what you wish for. You might just get it." And what I noticed was she started to manifest things. And manifestation accelerates when you put a lot of emotional energy behind something.
Yeah.
I want to get a job where I get paid to do nothing. I'm tired. I'm sick. She's going to the hospital. She's got heart problems. She can't sleep. She's going to the hospital. She's got sleeping problems. I want a job where I get paid to do nothing. And I said, "Sweetie, be careful what you wish for. You might just get it." Whatever. Husband, fiance, what does he know? Anyway, she flew to the UK, great flight, comes back. I get a telephone call at about 4:30 in the morning. And it's my duty controller. And the duty controller said to me, he said, "Daniel, good morning. This is not a duty call." I said, "Okay. Then what is it?" He said, "It's your fiance." I said, "Okay." He said, "There's been an accident on the aircraft. Can you come down to the hospital?" So I launched out of bed, went down to the hospital, and there she is getting pulled out of the back of the ambulance, and she's in a cast from her ankle to her hip. And she'd had an accident on the aircraft. Rushed us straight to the hospital, ready for surgery. They proposed to me a particular type of surgery, and I said, "I don't think this is the right one." And so we just waited 24 hours. We found another option, and she went in for surgery. She had fractured her kneecap in 5 places, and they wanted to remove the kneecap, and they tried to convince me that you don't need a kneecap. And I'm thinking to myself, what does a leg look like with no kneecap? Must look like a bloody sausage or something. I'm like, there's no way you can remove the kneecap. Next doctor said, "We'll operate on it." So we operated on it. He came back out. We met with management, and they said, "This type of accident is going to take 2.5 years of rehabilitation. But don't worry about a thing. You've still got your job, and we'll cover all the costs."
Just got to wish.
And I said to her, "Sweetheart," I said, "I've been telling you for 6 months, be careful what you wish for. You might just get it." So what I've learned is that our words have power. And the more emotion that we put behind it, the faster we manifest things in our life. It's like when people get into selling for the first time, they're so excited. They're so enthusiastic. They launch out of the gate and they get what people call is beginner's luck. They wanted it. They didn't get in sales to fail. They got into sales to make a ton of money. But that emotion over time wears off.
Yeah.
So they don't get what they want. So what I've learned in my life, and I might have said to you this in coaching, say it how you want it. Don't play games with your mind. If my wife would have said something else, she would have got it. But she wanted a job where she got paid to do nothing. She got exactly what she wanted. And I said to her, "You got what you wanted." She said, "But that's not what I really wanted."
I think manifestation's a real thing. And again, back to the energy thing, I want to talk about wakeboarding and the transition to coaching because somehow you became an Australian wakeboarding champion.
Mm-hmm.
How did you go from being an Australian champion wakeboarder to then a global business coach?
I started water skiing at probably 6 or 7. And my dad was a really good barefooter, and he could break the world records barefoot water skiing. That means no boots, no skis, just
barefoot
on your feet.
Yep.
And when he used to water ski when he was younger, they didn't wear wetsuits. They used to wear denim jeans. So it's kind of a little bit in the blood. And we started to water ski, and then my brother got a wakeboard, and my brother's about 2 years older than me. And he had his car license, so after school he'd go out to the cable ski park, and this motherfucker, he would finish school at 3:15 and go straight to the cable ski park and ride for an hour or two.
Yeah.
I finished school at 3:20 and he wouldn't wait for me. Motherfucker. And so he's out there wakeboarding and I'm wanting to do this. And he's found this epic sport. And so automatically I was behind the 8 ball. He's like 2 years ahead of me and he's killing it on the wakeboard. And every single trick that comes out, he can do. And I still don't even own my own wakeboard yet. So he invited me out on the boat one day, and it was on the Penrith River, just kind of where the Penrith Panthers football club is.
Yep.
And he said, do you want to go wakeboarding? And I went out there, he rode and another bloke rode, and the limiting beliefs kicked in immediately. I was like, if I go out, I'm going to make a fool of myself. I'm going to look like an idiot. I'm going to look so dumb. And I was listening to my self-talk thinking, this is not healthy. And then I started to develop excusitis. My excuse-making gland started to swell. And my brother said, go out in the water. I'm thinking to myself, you just went out there and you were ripping it. I'm a beginner. I'm going to look stupid. And so I said, I don't have a life jacket. He said, I'll give you one. I said, it's a little bit cold. I don't have a wetsuit. He said, stop being a pussy. And I said, my back's sore. He's like, jump in the water. And eventually I got in the water and I was actually really scared. I didn't want to get embarrassed and I faked an injury. Oh, my back. Let me back in the boat. And both of these guys were like, you're not getting back in the boat. You got to stay in there. And so eventually I got up and I shocked myself. I thought I wouldn't be able to do it. And I got up and I was able to do it. And I definitely fell in love with it immediately. And I started to train at the cable ski park. I started to wakeboard. My parents bought us a good boat and we started to ride. And it was 2016. I was interviewed in a water skiers news magazine. So I'm only maybe just a couple of years riding and I'm already in the magazines. And they said, Daniel, what's your number one goal? And I said, I want to be an Australian champion athlete. And that was my goal in 2016. And so I started to practice and train. I become a state champion athlete. I become a state champion athlete for the second time and then the third time. And then I competed at the Extreme Games, which is the equivalent to the Olympics.
Olympics, yeah. I was going to say that's pretty cool.
And so I was in the top 10 in the world at that competition. I got a 9th and a 10th. And this was against the world's best riders at the time.
And how long did you wakeboard for?
I rode up until I was 26. And it took me 10 years to achieve that goal. And on the way to the goal, I had so many setbacks. 2 major knee surgeries. The first knee surgery, I broke. Well, you've got a posterior cruciate ligament and it's really strong.
Yep.
And I hyperextended my knee, so I landed and my knee bent backwards like that, so the toes are coming up. And the PCL is so strong that it broke the bone. So the doctor said, oh, you don't need your PCL, but you got knees of a 60-year-old man. You shouldn't wakeboard again. I was like, what do you know? A year later, I was going back to the same surgeon and now I've blown out my cartilage. He said, I told you last time you shouldn't do this. Anyway, I pursued it and it was in 2006 that I became the Australian champion. And I had already started to learn principles of goal setting. And about 6 weeks before the event, I had an accident and I stretched a ligament in my ankle and I couldn't walk and I was on crutches. But I started to visualize all the tricks that I wanted to do. So in my mind, I could see myself doing my first 5 tricks, turning around, coming back down the lake, doing my next 5 tricks. And for 6 weeks, I just replayed this same pattern in my mind over and over and again. I went to Thailand. I sat on the beach. I saw myself going up and down the lake. And then I saw myself standing on top of the podium with the trophy above my head. And the day of the Australian Championships, I went to the dock on a set of crutches. I did all the tricks that I said I'd do inside of my mind up the lake and down the lake. I did that twice and become the Australian champion.
Manifesting.
I wanted it so bad, and I had to overcome a lot of inner blockages. And I think the biggest one was I was so afraid to get hurt. And so I would hold myself back. And this is how I started to get into coaching. It was like, my physical body is equal to everybody else's. Why do other people have what I want to have? And I started to realize that it was just a mental and emotional blockage. And my brother said to me one day, he said, Daniel, he said, your biggest problem with wakeboarding is you only turn it up when there's a camera or a competition. He said, you're so worried about getting hurt than actually landing the trick and riding away. But nobody gave me a strategy. How do I change my mindset? I know how to work on my physical body, but how do I get that fear out of my head? And this is where I started to do a lot of personal development and realize that there was a mental and emotional block holding me back. And it was fear. But in those days, we couldn't talk about it. Like, how do I tell these guys that I'm afraid, that I'm fearful? You know, my name was Daniel Danger. I got to live up to Danny Dange. And that's how I got into the path of coaching. Because at age 16, these guys said to me, Daniel, would you come and coach our students? I said, what to? They said, to wakeboard. I said, me? I said, I'm only 16. They said, but you can coach people. They said, we've seen you. You don't know how to do the trick, but you can teach people the steps. That's your superpower. So I started coaching at 16. And then once I got to Emirates and was formally trained as a coach, then I thought to myself, I understand it now. Our mental and our emotional blockages are our biggest blockers to success. And then when I saw the power of the mind with my wife and how she manifested that accident and how she got healthy afterwards, I spent 2.5 years being her personal coach, being her personal therapist. And I thought, if it can work with my wife, and she was on the edge of wanting to end her life, and if you've ever had a partner and you're living in a house and your partner wants to end their life, it's a very real and scary thing. And I knew that if I could help her through that, I could help others. And so by the time I finished at Emirates Airline, I was 32 and I knew what I wanted to do.
So if you were to put it in one sentence of what elite sport taught you about performance that most people miss in business today, how would you put that?
Focus on what you want. That's it. Your thoughts influence your feelings determine your actions. You've got 60,000 thoughts per day going through your mind.
That's a lot.
The worst part, 95% are on repeat and 80% are negative. What do we say? I don't want to blow this listing. I don't want to be late. I don't want to have a conflict. I don't want to have another bad month. And we tend to focus on what we don't want. I was taught to focus on what you want. And your mind is so powerful that once you focus in on a goal, you develop a set of blinkers. And they're healthy because you become absolutely obsessed about that goal. And it blocks out all the other incoming information. And if you just focus on what you want, you'll succeed. It's just a matter of time.
It's funny. I went into a big listing the other day, the end of last week, and I really want this listing. And I walked away from that, and I haven't had the result yet, or whether I've listed it or not. And I was saying to myself, what else can I do so I don't lose the listing? What else can I do so I don't miss it? And then I was like, fuck, what am I saying? And now, literally over the weekend and the last 2 days, I was listening to myself talk, and I believe in that. And now my dialogue is, or my mindset around that is, I'm going to win this listing. Is there anything that I can do extra to help me win this listing? Because I'm winning at all costs. But it's true.
The mind's
a funny thing.
Is so powerful.
Yeah.
And we're only really scratching the surface on what we are capable of. As soon as you focus on what you want, you activate a part of your mind, and it's called a reticular activation system. So you decided recently that you wanted a new car, correct?
Yes.
And as soon as you decided that's what you wanted, you started to see it everywhere.
Yeah, that's actually true.
You start to pay attention to it. You drive down the street, and it wasn't there last week, but now it is there. You drive past the showroom, you see it, you bring it up in conversation. And now it's everywhere you look. And this is called a reticular activation system. And whatever you focus on, positive or negative, grows inside your mind.
Yeah.
And you probably hear it. You'll be laying down and you'll hear that, and you'll say, I know exactly what it is. And all of your senses focus on that one thing. And you start to ask yourself, how can I get it? And then you just become laser focused. All the other cars that you thought about in the past no longer exist.
Move aside, yeah.
So thoughts are electric inside of your brain, and feelings are chemical inside of your body. So thoughts influence your feeling. Thoughts are electric. Feelings are chemical. And when you think about what you want, you have a rush of endorphins. Have you ever set a goal and all of a sudden the adrenaline kicks in? The optimism and the hope ignites?
Yeah.
All of the worries and concerns in the world disappear? It's because when you set a goal, you get free drugs. And it activates all these free drugs inside your body. You feel so optimistic. You get all of this energy that you never had before. And now you've got a goal. You've got something to focus on. All of your worries disappear. So if you can just focus on that one thing long enough, you'll get it. And if you've got enough emotional reasons why you must not fail, and if you've got enough emotional reasons why you must succeed, you'll have enough fuel in the tank. One guy in Sydney, I said to him, what do you want? He said, I want to be a successful real estate agent. And I said, cool. I want you to write down exactly what you want. And I want you to give me 10 reasons why you must succeed and 10 reasons why you must not fail. I saw him 2 weeks later and I said, did you do the task? He said, no. And I said, well, I can't work with you. If you don't have reasons to succeed and reasons why you must not fail, nothing's going to happen. Coaching is not going to change your life. He said, okay, I'll do it. And I said, okay, this time I want you to give me 20 reasons why you must succeed and 20 reasons why you must not fail. And he said, gee, that's a bit tough. And I said, how bad do you want it? He went away. A month later, he came back and he said, I haven't done the task. I said, well, we can't coach. And he said, well, I can't work with you. I said, that's okay. You're not ready. He came back to me and said, you know what? I think I want to do it. And I said, well, write down exactly what you want. He said, I want to leave the family business. I want to buy my own business. I want to have a rent roll. I want to be a major shareholder. He gave me 100 reasons why he must not fail. He gave me 100 reasons why he must succeed. And within about 5 years, he purchased the majority share in his office. Today, he has 14 people working for him. He's the first person in his family to own a house. He's bought a house for his mother. is financially independent, and in his early 40s, he has the choice to work or not. And I said to him, I said, what changed? He said, all I changed was reasons why I must not fail and reasons why I must succeed. And he said, that was the fuel that got me through all the tough times. But he focused on what he wanted. Instead of seeing all the reasons why he couldn't succeed, he started to see all the reasons and ways he could. Same guy, different story. He just wanted it.
As you're talking to me now, explaining this, I'm thinking some people are motivated by positive stuff, so positive reinforcement or just wanting to achieve something, right? But then there's negative. So some people are actually driven by such a huge amount of fear that they are terrified that if they don't do something, they're not going to achieve the outcome or they'll be worse off. And they're so terrified of being or staying somewhere. That's what actually drives them. So they're two different lanes. Why is that? Like me, growing up, I was always shit scared of being average or not being good enough or not feeling accepted. So that would always drive my performance compared to some other kids that would just see something positive and be like, I want to go do that. But I would perform based on being terrified of staying where I was or not being good enough. Is that common?
It's the story of humans. It's the Freudian pleasure pain principle.
Yeah.
It's the carrot and it's the stick.
Yeah.
And everybody's wired differently. And there is a better balance. But you can have a billionaire who's motivated through pain and you can have a billionaire motivated through pleasure. You've got to figure out what your balance is. What I believe is that we have to move away from pain and then move towards pleasure. Because if I'm motivated on pain, I'm focusing on the source of pain. And if I just get far enough away, let's say there's a fire and I'm up close to it. If I'm up close, I'm burning. But if I just get a couple of steps back, the heat's off. But I'm still focusing on the fire. What I really want to focus on is what I want. So in coaching, a really good coach is going to use a 20, 30, 50 principle. 20% of the focus should be on the past and where you're coming from. 30% of the time should be spent on where you are. And 50% should be moving towards the future. And unfortunately, whatever you focus on becomes a suggestion to your unconscious mind. And your unconscious mind is what generates your behaviours. So some people, because of early childhood experiences, fear the stick. Others are focused on the carrot.
Yep.
And that's just the Freudian pleasure-pain principle.
Because it's always served me well. Like I've always been an elite high performer. But in saying that, my next question would be, is that healthy? Because sometimes it doesn't feel like that. It can be very draining and consume a lot of energy.
Yep. So whenever you see performance going up and down like this in any industry, the majority of the time people are focused on what they don't want. I don't want to have another bad month. So when they're in a dip, when they're in a low, they're going to fight like hell. Watch me perform. I'm backed into a corner. I'm going to fight my way out. But as soon as they get what they want, all the pressure's off and there's nothing to move towards. So ever so slowly, they drift back down into the pit.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever been in an Uber or a taxi and that taxi driver's just on and off the gas.
Yeah.
And you start to feel nauseous. That's what happens when you focus on what you don't want. You're always trying to move away from pain. And once it doesn't hurt anymore, the foot comes off the accelerator pedal.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
So with goal setting, you're going to spend the rest of your life in your future. There's nothing that you can do about the past. You can't change it. Yes, you can learn from it, but you're going to spend the rest of your time in your future. And so what we should be thinking about all of the time is our goals and how we're going to get there. Not if we're going to get there, how. We've just got to think about how we get there. And when you think about how, your mind starts to generate new ideas and new possibilities. So you'll set a goal. When you set a goal, you're asking yourself, how can I achieve this thing? And a new idea comes into the mind. You attract a new person into your life. You listen to a different podcast. You have a conversation with a vendor and all of a sudden there's a new idea. And you think, I'm going to use that idea to get another step forward. And as long as you're focusing on that one thing that you want, all of your mental energies are on that. And that should be your single defining focus. What do I want? And then you just talk about that one thing. You become obsessed with it and you allow no other thoughts to come into your mind. But as we said before, 60,000 thoughts, 95% are just on repeat. And you've got to get out of that old cycle. 80% are negative. You've got to be able to focus on what you want.
That's interesting. I'm still learning that today, to consciously focus on. And I think the really important thing to note too is the importance and how powerful it is to actually write your goals down.
Do you know what happens when you
So powerful.
write your goals down? Do you know what happens in the mind?
Becomes real.
Becomes real.
It's a real thing.
When you write something down, it's called a psycho-neuro-motor activity. Every time you write it down on paper, it's literally programming and reprogramming your subconscious mind. You bypass the logic mind that says, this is not possible, that's not for you, others, but not you. And you write it down and it bypasses the conscious mind, goes straight to the subconscious. Your conscious mind is the goal setter, but your unconscious mind is the goal getter. And what we have to do is we have to constantly think about what we want. We have to constantly write down what we want. And we're rewriting a new program. Typing doesn't do it. Only writing does it. And then once you write it down enough times, you create what's called a dynamic tension. Remember at school we used to have those elastic bands and you start to stretch them out?
Yeah,
and you stretch out the elastic band and it goes from like that reddy colour and it starts to turn like a milky colour and you keep stretching it and there's a point where you know it's going to snap.
Yeah.
That's essentially what you're doing with your mind. You're breaking through those limitations. And the way that you do that is you write down your goal. The other thing that happens is when you write down your goal, have you noticed that when you write, you're also speaking? You're sub-vocalizing. Okay?
Yeah, I do that.
Yeah, it is now.
Yeah, I do that.
26th of, it's now the 30th of June, 2027. And I now earn 1.6 million GCI. What happens is you're distorting time. And your mind, your unconscious mind, which lives in the present moment, believes that this thing is already happening. And so you write it down, you sub-vocalize it, and your body is getting imprinted with this new message. And then eventually what happens is your conscious mind catches up and says, I'm a $1.6 million earner. I'm a $1.6 million earner. You start to change the way you think, the way you feel, the way you act. The decisions you make start to change. And then after the decisions change, you take new actions and then you start to get a new result. And when you write down your goals, there was a book and it was called What They Don't Teach You in Harvard. People who thought about their goals within about 10 years would double their income just by thinking about their goals. People who wrote down their goals were earning 10 times more than the majority of the population. The people who were writing their goals down on a daily basis and reviewing on a daily basis were earning 16 times more than the other people combined.
That's wild.
And so when you write it down, it becomes your reality.
Straight after this potty, I'm going back to write my goals down.
You've got to write it down.
It's funny because you write it down once a year, generally. And then you go back to it on a recap of the year.
What day do you write it down?
It's
31st of December, New Year's resolution.
I work on financial years, but I would imagine that most people would do, at the end of the year.
You've got an iWatch. Do you have Strava on it?
No.
There's an app called Strava, and they were tracking the workouts of hundreds of thousands of people. And they started to have a look at people's New Year's resolutions. All the people who set a New Year's resolution on the 31st of December, 98% of the people had quit their New Year's resolution by the 14th of January. So within 14 days of setting a goal, 98% of the population have already quit on their goal. I think that's important because you realise that there's not a lot of competition in this world. Imagine that. People can't even commit for 14 days.
So true.
So they call it Quitter's Day, 14th of January. But if you can just get past that hump, you've got a significant advantage. That's your competition. The world's not a tough place to succeed in.
No, it's not.
The bar is so low. But if we write it down and eventually we convince ourselves of it, it'll start to happen. It doesn't mean that we don't have to work. We've still got to work towards it. But at least it gives us a path and a direction. So you've got to write your goals down.
Daniel, if someone listening right now feels stuck, overwhelmed, or burnt out, what should they do first?
Ask for help. Got to ask for help. In Australia, we have been conditioned that asking for help is a sign of weakness. But with the people that you deal with, you realise that these people, when they ask for help, it's actually a sign of strength. And we've got to learn to ask for help. And the reason why I say that is when I was in aviation, we were given these $500 million aircrafts. The pilot, his job was to fly the aircraft safely from Dubai to Los Angeles. And that's all he did. Other people pumped up the tyres on the aircraft. Other people fueled it. Other people put the catering on the aircraft. Everybody had their area of specialisation. And sometimes in our culture, we don't want to be perceived as having a weakness.
Yeah.
And we think a weakness is something to be ashamed of, but we've got to ask for help. When I was going through my learning disabilities, I asked for a lot of help. A lot of people actually put their hand up and said, we can help. I've realised that throughout my life, if I have the willingness to ask for help, so many people will come forward. Got to ask.
So this could apply to anyone, right? Let's use real estate agents as an example. Sales, high pressure job, performance. Could you walk us through how you would coach someone in real estate through that situation if they came to you?
Through stress?
Yeah. Okay. Stress, burnt out, and feeling stuck, overwhelmed.
There's 5 steps in a coaching process. Not 4, not 6, there's 5. And whenever coaching starts, you get clarity on your goal.
Yep.
So you got to figure out exactly what you want. Secondly, you have to figure out where you're starting from, and that gives you the gap. And all coaching takes place in that gap. That's the first step. Secondly, you've got to brainstorm ideas. Thirdly, you have to put your plans together. Fourthly, you have to anticipate your obstacles. And then fifthly, you've got to learn to course correct. So they're the 5 steps of coaching. If it comes to stress and burnout, what I like to do is I like to have the agent complete a vocal health screening like you did.
Yep.
And I want to get the facts. What's happening with your sleep quality? I want to know that. What's happening in your immune system? What's happening with your chronic fatigue levels? Because if we can have a look at sleep, and if we can just get you sleeping better, immediately your emotional health will improve. Immediately your mental health will improve. So I want to look at that first. The other thing that I want to have a look at is how your brain's wired. Are you more left brain? Are you more right brain? Or are you balanced? Based on that will determine how I coach the person. Because coaching is not one size fits all.
Yeah.
It has to be designed specifically for the individual. When we look at emotions, we also have a look at the frequent and the core emotions. And as we said before, that these emotions get inside the bloodstream and they get pushed out to all the systems in the body. And there might be an emotion in there, a frequent emotion that keeps coming up that's outside of the agent's awareness. We figure what that is out. We figure out what it is immediately. And then we also have a look at the core emotion. The core emotion, and we said before that this technology seems sci-fi.
Yeah.
Your core emotion exists inside your amygdala. It's the part of the brain that stores emotional memory. And we might have had traumatic events that happened in childhood that we've never resolved. And what we find is that when people get their first bit of success, these old problems from the past all of a sudden come up. And people are like, why am I thinking about that? I've just got the car. I've just got the listing. I've just done my best month. And all this stuff's coming up from the past. And what do? We want to repress it. We try to push it back down under the surface. And this is where we say unrepressed or repressed emotions never die. They just come out in uglier ways. And the uglier way is the stress and burnout. I'll then have a look at their mental health. And mental health exists of 3 things. And when I had this technology designed, I had been studying the Journal of American Medicine. And what it said was that 60 to 70% of visits to a hospital was because of stress. Imagine that, 60 to 70% of the people going to the doctors and to the hospital is because of stress. 93% of people never get help. And we've got to figure out, is it anxiety? Because how you deal with anxiety is different to how you deal with depression.
Yeah.
And then we also want to have a look at their stress level. And if stress is the problem, we deal with that. There could be other problems that might come to your levels of courage or to your procrastination. So the first thing is really figuring out what's the problem. And if you can get we say an accurate diagnosis is half the cure. We're not diagnosing people. I'm not a doctor. But we've got to figure out what the real problem is. And once you figure that out, now you can unleash the coaching process.
Do you think that if everybody just slept a lot better, that would eliminate most of the problems? How many people in Australia? What's the population now? 25 million people. What if everyone had 30% better quality sleep? What would the world look like? Like, does that honestly, like, if people slept better, what change would there be? Do you think?
Today, 50% of the world's population suffers from sleep deprivation. They're trying to live on less than 5 hours of sleep. People who have less than 5 hours of sleep per night for 5 days in a row, their body goes into a pre-diabetic state. If your brain is starved of oxygen for 3 minutes, you're brain dead. If you are starved of sleep for 10 to 13 days, you're dead. So when you look around, a lot of people are just walking dead. They're not sleeping. If you improve your sleep from 6 to 7 hours a night, 400% less likely to have cold or flu.
That's crazy, just by sleeping more.
But if you don't care about any of that and you only care about your income, salespeople with better sleep quality produce 14% more revenue. 14% by better sleep. Salespeople who are sleep compromised make 50% less calls. So if you only care about the money, sleep is better for your bank account.
Yeah.
Sleep is better for your prospecting.
That's crazy.
Nuts.
Maybe there wouldn't be another war coming if people just slept a little bit more.
Let me ask the boys about their penis. How many erections do you get when you're asleep? Count it. Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 4? A healthy guy will get 3 to 4 erections per night when they're not sleep deprived. But you speak to somebody who's sleep deprived, they'll struggle to get 1 or 2 erections in their sleep. So what it does to the body is it compromises all the systems. If you're sleep deprived, you have a very sensitive immune system. If you're sleep deprived, you also suffer more chronic fatigue levels. I spoke to a guy yesterday. He said, Daniel, I sleep 8 hours a night and I still wake up tired. And I said, are you dreaming? He said, I don't dream anymore. And if he's not dreaming, it means his body's not getting into stage 4 sleep. And it's only when you're in stage 4 sleep that you have emotional management and hormonal regulation. Why would we want to think about your penis? Well, when you get into a deep sleep, the body releases growth hormones.
Yeah.
So every professional bodybuilder has a KPI for sleep. Bodybuilders sleep more than anybody else because they know that all the growth and all the repair happens in the sleep. But what do? Is we try to tell everybody, look at the struggle that I'm going through. I am giving up my sleep. I'm up till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. Look at how hard I'm grinding. And all it does is it makes you sick. You gotta sleep. People can't fall pregnant. I'm not saying that the men can fall pregnant. The ladies can't fall pregnant because they're sleep deprived. The body's not functioning as it should.
So a good erection is a direct sign that you're healthy.
Your KPI should be good dick game.
Yeah.
And I was asking a guy today, I said, I want to ask you a question. The first one's an easy question, but the second one, if you don't want to answer it, that's okay. And he said, what's the second question? I said, I'm going to ask you about your willy. And I said, how many erections do you get a night? And he looked at me and said, 1.
Not enough.
Not enough. So the healthy male should get 3 to 4 erections a night. And this is a sign of your overall health, but it means you're getting deep, restorative sleep.
Yeah.
So how's your dick going? That's the only thing that matters.
I always, to finish off, always do this, which I enjoy, rapid fire questions. So I don't want you to overthink it too much. Whatever comes to mind first, short, sharp answers. What's one belief that changed your life?
Focus on what you want.
What's the biggest mistake high performers consistently make?
Buying in to your bullshit stories of why you can't have what you want.
I like that. What's something you believe now that you didn't have 5 years ago?
Nobody's luckier than you. Nobody's smarter than you. Nobody has an advantage over you.
How do you define success in one sentence?
Doing what you love.
And to finish, if everything that you've built disappeared tomorrow, what would Daniel Tolson do first?
I'd write my goals.
Daniel, I've had a personal experience with you. Tens of thousands of other people have had a connection with you. My personal opinion, but what you do is amazing. You probably don't realize the effect that you actually do have on people that compounds. So the tens and tens of thousands of people over the hundreds of countries that you've visited will compound to far more people, and they'll help other people. Thank you for being on the podcast today. Anyone that wants to reach out to Daniel, I've got his details. I highly recommend his coaching. He's incredible at what he does. If you're off, not feeling right, stuck, or anything like that, I do recommend reach out. He's incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you.